Thank you. I'd like to ask the Secretary of State. The big society and the localism agenda clearly have very important roles to play, but there are tensions between local and national interests and limits to the big society approach. I'd be really interested in your thoughts on how these tensions can be resolved, particularly given your laudable ambitions to go further and faster on this agenda.
Okay, well, Hannah, I don't accept really that there are limitations to the big society approach, because it is by very definition big, and I'll come on to that. I mean, that's essentially, it's constrained by our own limitation in seeing the scope of it, and I think the scope is exponential. But just coming to your thought about tensions, I used to do the local government brief in opposition, and what so many local government representatives were yearning for were actually greater freedom, the freedom to innovate and to have the levers of power at the local level to give expression to what the people that they lived amongst and served really wanted. So I think far from there being greater tension between local and national, I think that the coalition government commitment to decentralise, give an expression in the localism bill about to be introduced into Parliament, which includes a general power of competence for local government. You couldn't get a more expansive power than that, is the very thing that local government has asked government for. So far from there being a tension, I think we've just eased the tension. We're just about to ease the tension in a very important way that sets local government free to make those decisions and to use its resources in the way that it sees fit, accountable always to the people that it serves. So I think that the tension that there was is abating. As regards the big society, I'm an enthusiast for this because I constantly find examples in the communities that I visit, ever new examples of innovative ways of doing things differently. And just to name but a few, I've been impressed really by the way in which, particularly the younger generation, really get the issue of the need to be resource efficient. And I remember visiting a school, which pride of place in the school playground was an allotment where they were learning how to grow their own vegetables. But they'd gone the extra mile by collecting up the food waste from the school dinners, which might or might not have yielded a significant volume of food waste, and they had composted that, turned that into fertiliser, and they were putting that onto their allotment and learning the life cycle of those precious resources. So I think, a small example like that that's intergenerational is very powerful. But, to give another one that's, at the national end of the spectrum, recently, the CPRE have come up with a not new but maybe timely idea that we go back to deposits on bottles so that people appreciate one more time that the glass in the bottle is a valuable resource. Now, that's something that we will incorporate into our waste review. It's certainly something that taught me as a child that it's not just a throwaway object, that actually it has a value, and it's certainly not something that should end up in landfills. So I think the opportunities are endless. I think the tension between central and local government is easing, and this is really a good time to be involved in this area.
I can just build on the tension issue, because actually I think they can be complementary. If you look at some of the work we're doing on food waste, we've got national activity going on with businesses and with the major retailers at a national level, but that's then complemented by activity very locally with individual local authorities, with local groups to actually make changes on the ground. And those two things can actually support each other. So.
Thank you. Okay. So the second question I've drawn from the list of the many that were supplied, and again it's another key theme, is going to be asked by David Workman, who's the Director General of CPI. David, I believe you're in third row back.
Thank you. Secretary of State, Liz. Particularly this question perhaps could be answered in the light of what you responded to the first question. But the question is, what roles do DEFRA and RAP intend to play in ensuring that quality materials emerge from the waste stream, which are then fit for closed-loop recycling?
Can I take that one first? Yeah. Well, David, as you know, I think quality is very important. I think if you maintain the quality, you're able to get a closed-loop recovery happening, and that maximises the value of the materials. We are working with the Environment Agency and with DEFRA and with the ESA to further develop the ESA's recycling registration system, and to include material for the UK markets as well as export markets in that scheme. And that will include some standards, which I think will help provide that greater consistency. So definitely some work going on.
Well, I think we need to make it easier for people. I think that people want to recycle more. They understand these materials are precious, but I think people can be turned off doing their bit if it's made difficult, or if they feel they're going to be punished for doing the wrong thing. We get bad examples of an elderly pensioner being reprimanded for putting her butter container in the wrong recycling receptacle. That's the kind of thing I think we want to get away from. I think there are real opportunities to help people understand how they can do their bit even better. You will know yourself that if you get contaminated waste, if you get food waste mixed amongst otherwise recyclable materials that could go in a clean state to recycling, you can actually reduce the value. And I think actually members of the public may not realise that. They may not realise that washing out your plastic milk container could make all the difference. And it's a small thing to do. So I think it's finding a non-onerous way of inspiring people to do the right thing. They want to do the right thing, but we need to make it easy. And we should never miss the point that I tried to bring out in my speech, that no, it isn't one size fits all. People live in all different circumstances, and it's easy to go from the circumstance you know well yourself and think everybody could do it this way. And I know from my own constituency it really isn't like that. We need to actually design services that fit with people's circumstances. They all would like to do their bit, but it has to be provided in a way that makes it easy for them to do their bit. And that is part of DEFRA's exercise in all of this. Not over-prescriptive. Let local government come up with a solution that works well in the locality that local government knows well. But we need to give people every chance to do the right thing.
Yeah, thank you very much. And now the third question that I've chosen from the list, which is from Dick Searle, who's Chief Executive of the Packaging Federation. Again, third row back. Dick, over to you.
Secretary of State, Liz, given that resource use is actually results from satisfying consumer demand for goods and services, what are we going to do, all of us, to engage consumers far better on their own responsibilities for pursuing a resource-efficient lifestyle?
Well, I think a couple of things. Again, let's try asking the consumers about their thoughts on the packaging. I think if I have to rip my way through another blister pack for a toothbrush without stabbing myself in the fingers with a pair of scissors, you all know that there is packaging that you experience in your daily lives, in the shopping that you collect, that drives you to distraction. But we never really get the chance to communicate that. We're one stage removed from the whole way it's assembled. And we've probably got views which, if people thought to ask us about, might actually inform the way these materials are packaged. And so I would encourage more of that dialogue. And for Hannah, again, I think that's another big society approach, is that people involved in saying how you would like things to be packaged. The other thing in terms of resource efficiency that I think is really important, and I give credit actually to the supermarkets that are really beginning to do this, is quite a lot of food waste is arising from the way in which the food is packaged for quite large quantities. Now, we've got an ageing population. Later in life, people tend to eat smaller portions. And, particularly for an elderly population, it's a good idea to provide smaller portion sizes. And when you, for example, buy fruit, where they're packaged as, buy one to eat now, one to ripen for later, that reduces food waste. So I think there are things that we can do by asking the consumer about actually how they would like their products packaged and supplied, and that will actually help us have a more resource-efficient economy.
Dick, I think there are various strands to this. I think we do need to engage with the consumers, and recycling is a way that consumers get involved in the whole resource efficiency agenda. So solving their problems, I see the frustration on my partner's face every day when he's chucking plastic in the bin that can't be recycled at the moment. So sorting those sorts of things out is important. But I do also think we've got to start thinking about the whole consumption thing. The really big wins are going to come from lifetime optimisation, getting more reuse, using products to the end of their life. And so finding business models that help consumers to actually do things. Because individual consumers feel powerless. And so I think if we have the business models, then the businesses can provide the right framework for them. Because people genuinely want to do the right thing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, it's now your opportunity in the room to ask questions. So can I ask you please to put your hands up in the air, and I will then come to you first. Well, the first one I saw was from a gentleman on the fourth row here. I think it's Bob Gordon from the BRC, am I right?
That's right.
Yeah, I thought so.
Thank you very much. Very, very interesting, insightful presentations. The question I wanted to ask builds on Hannah's point about big society and localism. I think let's be careful not to confuse those two things.
No, different things.
My question is, clearly some great scope, and like you say, the scope is exponential. I like that idea, but I'm concerned that there are many limitations, particularly with localism. If we think about, and actually there's a supermarket that does a regular survey, what's the important environmental issue here and now? And worryingly, litter comes out above climate change. I'm fearful that at a local level, litter is more important than climate change. Climate change is a national and an international problem, and when local council deliver their services, they're interested in securing the votes for the next time, which is all about delivering local solutions. Litter is not the environmental issue of our time, and we need to be sure that localism delivers against the big international issues like climate change.
I was going to say, I'm just trying to draw the question out from that.
The question is, how can localism deliver against climate change, resource efficiency? How will it avoid getting stuck on issues like litter?
Thank you, Bob.
Planning, win for anyone.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's be very clear. Localism is about devolving power down to the place where you live, so that you feel that you have greater control over what affects your life locally. You can vote in and out of office, the people who represent you at the local level, and that you feel confident that they have the power to make the decisions that you want them to that affect your local area. So that is localism. Big society is about taking responsibility for the way we live. And, for too long we've gone on assuming that, somebody will sort out a problem that in fact, but in truth is that, everybody thinks that somebody else will sort out the problem and then nothing gets done about it. So big society is actually about engaging people in taking responsibility to change the things around them that they say they want to see changed. So those are two quite distinct things, but they work extremely well in harness to deal both with the macro issue of how we reduce our carbon emissions and tackle climate change, and the more micro issue of removing the litter from the place where you live. They can operate at both levels because it is the local actions that are made. The things that you do, the way you live your life at the local level, decisions that you make in the interest of reducing the carbon footprint, that cumulatively for all of us in the room eventually have the big impact that help us reduce the threat of climate change. So it's from micro to macro, and localism and big society both contribute to making progress on those fronts.
Anything else?
I just think that you can have lots of local solutions to improvements in resource efficiency. Climate change is sometimes a bit more difficult for people to get their heads around, but certainly lots of resource efficiency ideas that can be local, local supply chains for getting materials to shops and things like that, local tackling of food waste.
Great stuff. There's a question there at the back, two rows from the back. I'll take that one next, please. That's right, so we have loads from the front at the moment. Can you say your name and where you're from, please?
Hi, it's Michael Warhurst from Friends of the Earth. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate both presenters. I thought they were very interesting presentations. We've been doing a lot of focusing at European level on the resource efficiency agenda, and I've also seen a presentation on the WBCSD Vision 2050, which I think is a very, very interesting piece of work. One of the things we've been pushing is that we should actually start to really measure our resource use, and it's good to see the work RAP's doing, looking at water, materials, climate. The fourth element we've been pushing for is land as well, because ultimately land's a pretty big limit, and purely knowing how much land you'll use if you decide that you're going to take, a biofuels target, for example, is very important. But I suppose coming to the question, when you're talking about products and product design and how you make the right products profitable and the wrong ones either come off the market or unprofitable, a lot of that really is European level legislation, because all the big, if you talk to Unilever, they want the same regulation in every country. They don't want to be dealing with an English regulatory system and a Welsh regulatory system and a Spanish regulatory system. So there's clear, I suppose my question is the UK prepared to advocate for intelligent product regulation at EU level?
Well, the answer to that is of course, but just consider what happened. Of course, we're a single market, so it's very important that in a single market there is a level playing field. But the alarming thing in the deproduction line that I described to you, which was really quite a novel thing, a government minister had cheerfully signed up to an end-of-life vehicle directive without there being any capacity to deproduce the cars, and there is a lesson in that. The waste electrical equipment directive is another prime example of a directive that was signed up to before, in fact, we had put the systems in place to operate it. Now, you might say it took those directives to bring about the change, and perhaps that is true. But I think what we need to do is get ahead of the curve as consumers, as local government, as business, because this is where we need to arrive at, is it resource efficiency. And, I'm wary of signing us up to a constant supply of directives, because quite often, there are considerable costs on business through doing that. So I would rather we got ahead of the game as a resource-efficient nation. I'm quite sure that we will have, what we do have now, the facilities to cope with deproducing the products that I've described. But it's a shame if we have to wait for the big stick to come along.
I completely agree. I mean, I think, Michael, there's so much to be gained from... There are so many leading businesses who want to make progress and develop more resource-efficient products because they're actually going to make more money out of it. So there's they are doing it for their own reasons, and I really see the legislation coming, sort of pushing the laggards. There's plenty of scope for us to work with the people who want to work further and faster. So, for example, things like Courtauld, we are working with companies who want to push forward. They're going beyond what legislation requires, and then you need to follow up behind with the legislation. But let's focus on the people who want to lead the way.
Okay, I'm looking at time. I think we've got time for 2 more questions. I'm going to take one at the very back, please, because that hand's been up for a while, and then I shall come to the front as the second one. So see if we can get these 2 in. Can I ask you to try and keep your questions brief so that we can fit them in, please?
Okay. Sue
Smith. At the back there, beg your pardon, sir. If you wouldn't mind
Sue
sitting
Smith, Clothes Aid. We collect waste textiles door to door for our partner charities. Recycling and reuse credits are an important source of income for charities which collect waste textiles from households and bring banks. How does the government plan to encourage local authorities to continue these payments? Stopping them is likely to result in the increase of textiles ending up in landfill, with the result that councils fail to meet their UK and EU diversion from landfill targets. And at the moment, 1 million tonnes of textiles ending up in landfill every year.
Well, obviously, textiles shouldn't be going to landfill. But certainly, when I look at my own local authority, and actually, when I visit most local authorities, where we're talking about clothes, actually, most recycling points have clothes banks, which people use quite extensively, so extensively usually that I can't, fit my recycled clothes in. And, it is a popular location. I think, again, come back to my point, I think it was Sue, was it? Come back to my point about you need to make it easy for people, but you need to listen to the way consumers of these services react to what's available. Now, interestingly enough, as a constituency MP, I've had a few letters of constituents who are getting rather tired of having the plastic bag with successive requests for picking up the clothes put on their doorstep and then missing the day. There is something about that not working as efficiently and effectively as it could. Now, I think if you work together with local authorities and look at the way in which we can make textile recycling facilities more user-friendly, then there's no reason why what you've described can't go from strength to strength. But I'm just picking up a bit of a reaction from constituents about the way they're being sort of almost pestered with these requests for different coloured plastic sacks landing on their doorstep and trying to remember which day to get it out, which tells me it isn't as user-friendly as it could be. Obviously, it shouldn't go to landfill. That's quite clear. That's one of the things that we shouldn't be putting in landfill, along with glass and paper and wood and metal. Very little, if anything, should be going to landfill, in my view.
I just want to try and fit in one extra question then, please. I did promise this gentleman down at the front here to do that, if that's okay.
My name is Sean Powell, from a company called Think Energy UK.
Think Energy.
Can I ask you, how many questions can I ask?
Just the one, and I only have 2 minutes. So can I give you 15 seconds to ask a question, please?
Definitely, yeah. The question is basically, the question is that there's a free lunch being offered by Carbon Trust, right? There's a free lunch. I know in this world, people believe there's a catch, or there's no such thing as free lunch. My question is, why isn't there more legislation to make businesses, right, really take this free lunch? The meaning of that is that we as a company offer 50%. We can, even in this place here, we are here, it's a very nice building, but we can, we challenge any company to give us a challenge to save them 50%, cut their 50% of their energy costs. Yeah. The reason is we're offering this service, it's no obligation service, but the companies are still saying there's a catch. They're thinking, well, I don't want to do it. And I really want to know, why isn't there legislation, want to really put in place, like a stick really, to make businesses do something? Yeah.
Well, I have to tell you 2 things in the House of Commons. One is, if your question is too long or your subject is too long, the Speaker sits you down. And secondly, no politician would agree with you that's anything called a free lunch. So the point of the Carbon Trust does a fantastic job, and I would like to pay tribute to what they do. But in what I said in my speech, I think there were 2 really important points. The Green Deal is in essence what you're describing, which is a fantastic opportunity to draw down capital in advance from your utility bill to make energy conservation changes to your home. But it is non-prescriptive to you as a householder about how you should use that, because some people already have some loft insulation but don't have cavity wall insulation. Some people don't have double glazing and would like secondary glazing. The point about it is, here's a lump sum of £6,000 worth of capital on the average home to make those changes. And the reason why the utility companies, I believe, are so willing to provide, I think, what you would describe as a free lunch, but you're still paying the electricity bill. But the point is that the capital is spread, its payback is over a long period of time. Now, why are they motivated to do that? And the straight answer to the question is in the chief scientist's warning, that there may come a time when not only are people finding it hard to be able to buy a place to live, they're finding it hard to be able to run the place where they live. And so this is actually about helping people to live in a resource-efficient way and to sustain them in their homes for longer. And that facility is being extended to business, because it's the same battle for business. All of you will know small and medium-sized enterprises in your locality. Very rarely were those workshops ever built with energy conservation in mind. And it is very hard for small and medium-sized enterprises to get their hands on capital to introduce those energy conservation measures. So these 2 things in the Green Deal will help. Legislation isn't always the answer. You can legislate, you think, job done, but nothing happens. A stick, as I said, doesn't work as well as a carrot. But the Green Deal is a carrot. It's one, I think, that will work both for householders and for business. And it is something I hope lots of people will take advantage of.
Thank you very much. Well, that's run out of time for the questions now. Unfortunately, the Secretary of State has to leave us at this point. But thank you very much indeed for finding the time in your busy schedule to come and speak to us this morning. And can we all thank the Secretary of State in the way that's traditional? Thank you very much.